Speaker.
I call John O'Naylor.
Can I just start by agreeing with Jacinda Ardern that I think that the committee did work through this really constructively, and I think it's really important and beholden on the Parliament that actually when we have these kinds of issues that we really do seek to get the very best outcome that we possibly can. And in particular, I think with this piece of legislation is the focus on making things as good for victims within the criminal justice system as possible. One of the great risks that we have in our judicial system is that victims of crime end up being re-victimised by the process, and I think it's beholden on us to ensure that the process that we have does everything that we can to limit the chance of that taking place. And so, as other speakers have said, talking about this presumption that a child will be able to give evidence in alternative ways rather than having to potentially sit in an open court in front of their alleged abuser or in those sorts of situations, or perhaps face some sort of cross-examination, I think is critical that we have that presumption. It's not something that someone has to apply for, but they can knowingly go into the situation knowing that they will be protected. I think also there's a lot of stress that can be involved for victims if they have given, for example, video evidence, wondering what is going to happen with that video evidence. At the moment, obviously, defence attorneys and the like have access to that information. And so for a victim to wonder whether or not their video evidence is potentially going to wind up in the hands, again, of their abuser, of the person who's perpetrated against them, will create worry, it will create stress. And so, again, putting parameters around that is very positive. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to touch a little bit on the notion of plea discussions. Now, the Speaker before me referred to needing to ensure that we protected people who may sort of give up their rights to a proper trial through a plea discussion process. But I think what we also need to remember is that actually this particular part of the legislation also has benefits for victims. I know I was involved in a situation a number of years ago with close family members who had been victims of a crime, and having to sort of work through what a defended trial might mean for them, and them having to go through the process of a defended trial with this particular offender. In the end, there was some negotiation took place, and that person did agree to plead guilty, ultimately actually not to a lesser charge, to the greater charge in this particular situation. But actually what it did show was that actually our system, if we get it right, if we get the right parameters around it, can be supportive of victims. It can ensure that we get good outcomes for victims, and I believe that this legislation goes a long way into ensuring that our system overall will be better for victims, and I commend it to the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.